The letter arrived on a Tuesday, nestled between a cable bill and a grocery store flyer. I might have missed it entirely, if not for the prestigious emblem in the corner, Stanford University's seal, embossed in cardinal red. My hands trembled as I tore open the envelope, heart pounding against my ribs. Dear Ms. Abigail Chen, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as a recipient of the Wellington Foundation Full Academic Scholarship. I stopped reading, a scream of pure joy bursting from my lungs. 4 years of relentless studying, of sacrificing weekends and social events, of falling asleep with textbooks as pillows. It had all paid off. A full ride to Stanford, my dream school since 7th grade, when I'd visited the campus during my cousin's graduation and fallen in love with the Spanish architecture, the palm-lined avenues, the palpable energy of innovation. Mom! Dad! I raced. Through our modest suburban home, letter clutched to my chest like a precious artifact. I got it! The Wellington Scholarship! Full tuition! My parents emerged from different rooms. Mom from the kitchen, still wearing oven mitts, and Dad from his home office, reading glasses perched on his nose, their faces transformed as I waved the letter, pride blooming like twin suns. My brilliant girl, Mom whispered, pulling me into a fierce hug that smelled of garlic and ginger. I knew you could do it. Dad took the letter with reverent hands, skimming its contents before his eyes grew suspiciously bright behind his glasses. The Wellington. This is the most prestigious undergraduate scholarship they offer. Only 5 students nationwide. His voice cracked, and he cleared his throat. This is extraordinary, Abby. In that moment, everything felt perfect. All the late nights, all the stress-induced headaches, all the times I'd questioned whether I was pushing myself too hard. It had all been worth it for this moment of pure, unadulterated triumph. If only I'd known how quickly triumph could turn to betrayal. The celebration continued through dinner, where Mom prepared my favorites, scallion pancakes and mapo tofu, and Dad opened a bottle of champagne, pouring me a small glass, despite being underage. Special occasions call for exceptions, he declared with a wink. Even my younger sister Olivia seemed genuinely happy for me, though at 16, she was usually too cool to show enthusiasm for anything family-related. Stanford guys are supposedly hot, she offered, as her form of congratulations, raising her glass of sparkling cider. Maybe you'll actually get a social life there. I laughed, too elated to be offended. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Liv. After dinner, Dad insisted on reading the entire acceptance package, poring over every detail with the thoroughness of the engineer he was. It says here you'll need to attend the Wellington Scholars Weekend next month to finalize everything, he noted, adjusting his glasses. All expenses paid. They're flying me out Thursday through Sunday, I confirmed, still slightly dazed by my good fortune. There's a formal dinner with the Wellington family and the other recipients. We'll need to get you a proper dress, Mom mused, already mentally ransacking my closet and finding it lacking. Something that says, future world leader. I rolled my eyes but couldn't stop smiling. I don't think they're expecting world leaders, Mom. With this scholarship, of course they are. She squeezed my hand. The Wellington doesn't just give money to anyone. They're investing in people who will make a difference. The weight of those expectations should have felt heavier, but that night, I felt capable of anything. I fell asleep reading and rereading. The acceptance letter, letting the words sink into my consciousness. This wasn't just about a free education. It was validation of everything I'd worked for. A promise that my future could transcend the financial constraints that had always defined our family's choices. The next few weeks passed in a blur of excitement and preparation. A shopping trip with Mom for the proper dress, a sleek navy blue number that cost more than I'd ever spent on clothing, but which Dad insisted was an investment. Endless research about Stanford's programs and professors I hope to work with. Daydreams about my future dorm room, decorated with string lights and inspirational quotes. I was so caught up in the future that I barely noticed the subtle shift in my parents' behavior, the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered a room, the tense expressions quickly masked with smiles when I looked their way, the increasing frequency of closed-door discussions in Dad's office. It wasn't until 3 days before my scheduled flight to Stanford that I realized something was wrong, very wrong. I needed my passport for the trip. Despite being domestic, the scholarship program required identification for the formal dinner at the Wellingtons' private estate. I remembered giving it to Dad for safekeeping after our family trip to Taiwan last summer, so I headed to his office to retrieve it. The door was closed, but voices drifted through, Mom and Dad speaking in the tense, measured tones they use during serious disagreements. "We have to tell her," Mom was saying. "The weekend is in 3 days." "I know that," Dad replied, frustration evident. "But the timing couldn't be worse. This will devastate her." "It doesn't change her acceptance to Stanford, just the funding. We'll figure something out." "Figure what out, Sarah?" "We're talking about over $70,000 a year. The second mortgage won't cover even half of that." A cold weight settled in my stomach. What were they talking about? What had happened to my scholarship? I raised my hand to knock, then hesitated, pressing my ear closer to the door instead. The Wellington Foundation was very clear. Dad continued, "The transfer is complete. There's nothing we can do to reverse it now." "But it wasn't our decision to make." Mom's voice rose slightly. "How could they just let us sign away Abby's scholarship without her consent? She's 18, for God's sake." "Because we're still her legal guardians on paper, and the paperwork was deliberately vague." Dad's voice dropped lower, forcing me to strain to hear. "Trust me, I've reviewed it a dozen times looking for a loophole. What we signed wasn't technically illegal, just deeply unethical." Mom shot back, redirecting a scholarship from one sibling to another without the recipient's knowledge. "It's unconscionable." The world tilted beneath my feet, redirecting a scholarship from one sibling to another. I pushed open the door without knocking, causing both my parents to startle. Dad quickly minimized whatever was on his computer screen, but not before I caught a glimpse of the Wellington Foundation letterhead. "Watch." "Did you do?" I demanded, my voice barely recognizable even to myself. "What did you do to my scholarship?" Their faces told me everything I needed to know before they spoke a single word. Guilt, remorse, and beneath it all, a terrible certainty that whatever they'd done couldn't be undone. "Abigail," Dad began, removing his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. "We need to talk about the Wellington scholarship." And just like that, my perfect future shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces. "Sit down, please," Mom said, gesturing to the small leather armchair in the corner of Dad's office. I remained standing, arms crossed. "I'd rather hear how you directed my scholarship standing up." They exchanged a look, that infuriating, parental telepathy that excluded me from whatever silent agreement they were making. Dad sighed, then turned his computer screen toward me. 2 weeks ago, we received this email from the Wellington Foundation, he explained, scrolling to reveal a message with several attachments. It concerned a unique opportunity they were offering to this year's scholarship recipients. I leaned closer, scanning the text. The message was addressed to parents/ guardians of Wellington scholars and referenced a family allocation program. The foundation apparently runs a separate initiative for exceptional siblings of Wellington scholars. Dad continued, when they researched our family, they discovered Olivia's remarkable musical talent and her recent acceptance to Juilliard's pre-college program, which we couldn't afford, Mom added quietly. Even with a partial scholarship, I felt like I'd been dunked in ice water. So what? You just gave them my scholarship? How is that even possible? Dad clicked on one of the attachments. A complex legal document filled with language about reallocation of educational funds and familial discretionary options. The Wellington Scholarship has an unusual structure, he explained his engineers, mind breaking down the technicalities. Unlike most scholarships that go directly to the university, the Wellington creates an educational trust for each recipient. As your legal guardians, we were given the option to redirect those funds within the immediate family for educational purposes. Without asking me, my voice rose higher than intended. The email made it seem like it was a standard part of the scholarship program, Mom said, though her eyes wouldn't meet mine. Like all recipients' families were given this choice. They presented it as a progressive approach to family education planning. And you believe that a prestigious scholarship would just let you give away my award to someone else. It's not that simple, Abby, Dad countered. The documentation was extremely convincing. There were testimonials from other families who had apparently made similar choices. Fake testimonials, I guessed, my mind racing ahead. This was never legitimate, was it? My parents fell silent, the answer hanging in the air between us. How much? I finally asked. How much of my scholarship did you give away? Another exchange of glances before Dad answered. The full amount. The room spun around me. The full? That's over $250,000. We thought we were making the right decision for both of you, Mom pleaded. Stanford had already accepted you. The letter said you could still attend with other financial aid options. Financial aid options? I repeated incredulously. You mean student loans that I'll be paying off until I'm 40. We'll help as much as we can, Dad insisted. We can take out a second mortgage, use our retirement savings, while Olivia gets a free ride to Juilliard. The unfairness of it burned like acid. Did she know about this? Was everyone in on this except me? Olivia doesn't know, Mom said quickly. We were going to tell both of you together this weekend. I paced the small office, trying to process the magnitude of what they'd done. So where did the money actually go? If this wasn't really from the Wellington Foundation, it was from Wellington, Dad interrupted. That's what makes this so confusing. We verified the email addresses, the documentation. Everything appeared legitimate. Until yesterday, Mom added. When I called the foundation to ask about travel arrangements for the scholars' weekend, they had no record of any family allocation program. And the representative I spoke with was alarmed by what I described. They're investigating now, Dad said, rubbing his temples. But the preliminary assessment is that someone within the foundation misappropriated your scholarship funds. The authorized transfer went to what appeared to be Juilliard's bursar office, but was actually a sophisticated dummy account. The implications hit me like a physical blow. So the money is just gone, stolen, and Olivia doesn't actually have funding for Juilliard either. They nodded grimly. The foundation is pursuing all legal avenues, Dad assured me, though his voice lacked conviction. But they've made it clear that they can't restore your scholarship this academic year. The endowment funds are allocated annually, and this year's yield tests have been depleted. I sank into the armchair, my legs no longer able to support me. So, I've lost my scholarship, because you signed paperwork without consulting me. And now some criminal has $250,000 that was supposed to be my education. We're so sorry, Abigail, Mum whispered, tears streaming down her face. We thought we were doing something good for both our daughters. Part of me wanted to scream at them, to unleash the fury and betrayal coursing through my veins. But the devastation on their faces stopped me. They had made a catastrophic mistake, yes, but they'd done it thinking they were helping both their children. The real villain was whoever had orchestrated this scheme. What did the foundation tell you about the person responsible? I asked, my analytical mind already shifting from shock to investigation. Dad looked surprised by my question. Not much, just that it appears to be an inside job. Someone with access to recipient information and foundation letterhead. Have they contacted the police? They said they're handling it internally for now. Apparently, there are complications. Something in his hesitation caught my attention. What kind of complications? Mom and Dad exchanged another look before Mom responded. The person they suspect is well connected, a member of the Wellington family itself. My eyebrows shot up. A Wellington stole my scholarship money? They didn't say that explicitly, Dad cautioned, but they implied that the situation is sensitive because of the individual's position. A new feeling surged through me, determination cutting through the shock and anger. Show me everything, every email, every document, every communication you had with this so-called family allocation program. Abby, the foundation said, not to, I don't care what they said. I cut Dad off. That was my scholarship, my future. If they're not going to fight for it properly because they're afraid of scandals or powerful family members, then I will. Reluctantly, Dad pulled up the entire email chain, and Mum retrieved a folder containing printed copies of everything they'd signed. As I began reading through the materials, a pattern emerged. Subtle psychological manipulation, fake time pressures, and strategic use of confusing legal language. Whoever had created this scam was sophisticated, knowledgeable about the foundation's internal workings, and very, very good at getting people to act against their own interests. Look at this signature, I said, pointing to the electronic signature on one of the documents. Dr. Elizabeth Wellington Pierce. Is that someone real? Dad nodded slowly. She's the granddaughter of the foundation's founder. She sits on the board of directors. The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a picture I didn't like at all. And did you speak with her directly during this process? No, Mom admitted. Everything was conducted through email and one phone call with someone who identified herself as Dr. Pierce's executive assistant. I straightened, a plan already forming in my mind. I'm still going to the Scholars' Weekend. But you can't, Dad began. The flight's already booked, right? The invitation hasn't been rescinded. I'm going to Stanford, and I'm going to meet the Wellington family, face to face. I gathered the documents into a neat pile. And I'm going to find out exactly who stole my future and how I'm going to get it back. As I walked out of the office with the folder of evidence, I felt a strange calm, replacing the initial shock. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Someone at the Wellington Foundation had made a grave miscalculation when they targeted my family. They had no idea who they were messing with. The flight to San Francisco was 3 hours of carefully controlled rage. I reviewed the fraudulent documents repeatedly, making notes on inconsistencies and suspicious details. The scheme had been clever, exploiting parental desire to provide for all their children equally, creating artificial time pressure, and using legitimate foundation letterhead and terminology. But there were telltale signs of deception if you knew where to look. like the fact that the Family Allocation Program documents use British spelling conventions, program, instead of program in several places, centralized instead of centralized, while official foundation materials consistently used American English, or the way Dr. Wellington Pierce's electronic signature varied slightly between documents, suggesting it had been copied and pasted rather than genuinely applied. By the time we landed, I had compiled a substantial list of discrepancies. The cab ride to the Stanford guest accommodations gave me time to organize my thoughts and strategy. I had no illusions about what I was attempting, confronting one of America's wealthiest families about potential fraud committed by one of their own. It was David versus Goliath. Except David didn't even have a slingshot. But I did have evidence, determination, and the moral high ground. It would have to be enough. The Wellington Scholars Weekend officially began with a welcome reception that evening. I checked into my assigned guest suite, a beautiful room that only intensified my sense of loss, and changed into the navy blue dress my parents had purchased for an occasion that was now fundamentally different from what we'd imagined. The reception was held in the university president's garden, lit with strings of fairy lights that transformed the space into something magical. Servers circulated with champagne flutes and elegant hors d'oeuvres. A string quartet played softly in the background. Under different circumstances, I would have been buzzing with excitement. A woman with a clipboard approached as I entered. "Name, please." "Abigail Chen." She scanned her list, then looked up with a puzzled expression. "I don't see you on the Wellington Scholars list." Here we go, I thought. That's strange. I received an acceptance letter and invitation to this weekend. I pulled out my phone, showing her the email confirmation for my attendance. She frowned. At the screen, "Let me check with my supervisor." While she stepped away, I surveyed the garden. About 20 students were already mingling, likely the actual scholarship recipients. Faculty members in cocktail attire chatted in small groups, and at the center of it all was an elegant older woman holding court, silver-haired, impeccably dressed in a crimson suit that subtly echoed Stanford's colors. Beside her stood a younger woman, perhaps in her 40s, with the same aristocratic bearing. The Wellingtons, I guessed. Grandmother and granddaughter. The family that had created the scholarship I'd earned and lost. The clipboard woman returned, with an older man in a bow tie, who introduced himself as Dr. Harrington, the Foundation's academic director. "Miss Chen, there seems to be some confusion," he said, his tone professionally concerned. "You were initially selected as a Wellington Scholar, but we received documentation redirecting your award. You shouldn't have received information about this weekend." I maintained eye contact, my voice steady. "The redirection was fraudulent, Dr. Harrington. My parents were misled into signing documents by someone impersonating Foundation officials." His eyebrows shot up. "That's a very serious allegation." "Yes, it is. One I've already discussed with the Foundation's General Office, who confirmed they're investigating." Dr. Harrington glanced nervously toward the Wellingtons. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "I don't think that's necessary," I interrupted. "Since Dr. Elizabeth Wellington Pierce's signature appears on the fraudulent documents, I believe the family would want to be involved in this conversation." His face paled. "Ms. Chen, I strongly advise—" "Is there a problem, Richard?" The silver-haired woman had approached, her cultured voice carrying the confidence of someone used to being the most important person in any room. Dr. Harrington cleared his throat. "Mrs. Wellington, this is Abigail Chen. She was one of our scholarship selectees, but there appears to be some administrative confusion. Mrs. Eleanor Wellington." the matriarch of the family and widow of the foundation's founder, turned her piercing blue eyes on me. Administrative confusion, I met her gaze directly. Someone from within your foundation fraudulently redirected my scholarship by tricking my parents into signing documentation they believed was legitimate. They used your granddaughter's name and signature to do it. If I'd expected shock or denial, I was disappointed. Mrs. Wellington's expression remained impassive, though something flickered in her eyes. Calculation, perhaps. That's quite an accusation, Miss Chen. She turned to Dr. Harrington. Has the foundation been made aware of this? Apparently so, he replied uncomfortably. Though this is the first I'm hearing of it. I see. Mrs. Wellington studied me for a moment, then made a decision. Walk with me, Miss Chen. It wasn't a request. She moved toward a more secluded area of the garden, and I followed, heart pounding but determined not to show fear. My husband established the Wellington Scholarship 50 years ago, she said without preamble. In that time, we've funded the education of over 200 exceptional young people, many of whom have gone on to remarkable achievements. The foundation's reputation is beyond reproach. I'm not questioning the foundation as a whole, I clarified. The actions of specific individuals within it. She stopped beneath the spreading branches of an oak tree, turning to face me. You believe my granddaughter is involved in some sort of fraud. The evidence suggests someone used her name and position, I said carefully. Whether she was directly involved or her identity was misappropriated is something the investigation should determine. Mrs. Wellington's lips thinned. May I see this evidence? I hesitated only briefly before retrieving the folder from my clutch. I'd made copies of everything, of course. These weren't my only records. She examined the documents with the sharp eye of someone who had reviewed countless legal papers, her expression revealing nothing. Finally, she looked up. You're either very brave or very foolish to come here with these accusations, Ms. Chen. I'm neither, I replied. I'm simply someone whose future was stolen. Something that might have been respect flickered across her face. The Wellington family has weathered many storms over its long history, Miss Chen. We've faced accusations, scandals, and attempts at extortion. We're still standing. This isn't an extortion attempt, I said firmly. It's a straightforward matter. My scholarship was fraudulently redirected. I want it restored. Even if what you say is true, if someone within our organization acted improperly, the funds have already been dispersed for this academic year. They cannot simply be recalled. I had anticipated this response. Then find alternative funding. Create an exception. The Wellington family certainly has the resources. Her eyebrows rose fractionally at my boldness. You researched me before coming here, she observed. What did you learn? That the Wellington fortune began in pharmaceuticals, but has since diversified into technology, real estate, and venture capital. I answered promptly. That your late husband valued education above all else, because he was the first in his family to attend college, and that the foundation's stated mission is to identify and nurture exceptional talent, regardless of background. A hint of a smile touched her lips. Thorough. What else? That your granddaughter, Dr. Elizabeth Wellington Pierce, has been involved in 2 previous financial scandals that were quietly settled out of court, and that the foundation's endowment is structured in such a way that individual family members have considerable discretionary power over certain funding allocations. At this, her expression tightened. You've done your homework, Miss Chen. But you're playing a dangerous game. Powerful families have powerful defenses. I'm not playing a game at all, Mrs. Wellington. I earned that scholarship through years of hard work and sacrifice. I'm simply trying to reclaim what's rightfully mine. She studied me for a long moment, as if reassessing her initial impression. Join me for breakfast tomorrow, 8 a.m., at the foundation offices on campus. She handed me back the folder. Bring these, and come alone, without waiting for my response. She walked away, rejoining the reception as if our conversation had never happened. I stood there under the oak tree, heart racing despite my outward calm. I'd just confronted one of the most powerful women in American philanthropy, and somehow secured a private meeting. It was progress, but I had no illusions about what I was up against. As I turned to leave the reception, my appetite for mingling completely gone. I noticed the younger woman who had been standing with Mrs. Wellington earlier, watching me intently from across the garden. Dr. Elizabeth Wellington Pierce, I presumed, the woman whose signature appeared on the fraudulent documents. Our eyes met briefly, and the hostility in her gaze was unmistakable. A chill ran down my spine as she deliberately turned away, speaking to a server who immediately approached me. Ms. Chen, I've been asked to escort you out. The reception is for confirmed scholarship recipients only. So that was how it would be. I nodded, maintaining my dignity, as I was politely but firmly removed from the event. As the garden gate closed behind me, I realized I'd just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I had publicly challenged the Wellington family on their own turf. Whether that was courageous or catastrophically stupid remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. There was no going back now. I barely slept that night, my mind racing through possible scenarios for the morning meeting. Was Mrs. Wellington genuinely interested in investigating the fraud? Or was this a strategic move to contain the situation? Was I walking into an opportunity or a trap? By morning, I'd settled on a plan. I would be direct but respectful, firm about my rights without making accusations I couldn't definitively prove. And most importantly, I would make it clear that I had secured evidence beyond what I'd shown her. The Wellington Foundation offices occupied an elegant sandstone building near the heart of campus. Inside, the decor balanced traditional academic gravitas with modern efficiency, gleaming wood paneling alongside state-of-the-art technology, oil portraits of donors gazing down at ergonomic workstations. A receptionist escorted me to a private dining room where Mrs. Wellington was already seated at a table set for breakfast. She wore a different suit today, navy blue with subtle gold accents, but the same air of unassailable authority. "You're punctual," she observed as I entered, a quality I appreciate. I took the seat across from her, placing my folder on the table beside me. "Thank you for meeting with me." A server appeared silently, pouring coffee and then disappearing. Mrs. Wellington took a measured sip before speaking. "I've reviewed our records concerning your scholarship, Ms. Chen. Your academic credentials are indeed exceptional. Perfect SAT scores, 4.0 GPA, remarkable extracurriculars, including your research on sustainable urban development that won the National Science Foundation's Young Innovator Award." She set down her cup. "You were, by all objective measures, an ideal Wellington scholar." The past tense stung, but I kept my expression neutral. "Then you understand why I'm pursuing this matter so vigorously." "I do. What I don't understand is why you believe my granddaughter is involved." Her tone remained conversational, but her eyes were sharp. "Elizabeth has devoted her career to expanding educational opportunities. The idea that she would divert scholarship funds is difficult to reconcile." "I'm not here to make accusations without evidence," I replied carefully. "The documents my parents received used Dr. Wellington Pierce's electronic signature and professional credentials. Whether she was directly involved or someone misappropriated Her identity is something I can't determine. A reasonable position. Mrs. Wellington nodded slightly. After our conversation last night, I made some inquiries. There are indeed irregularities in how your scholarship was handled. My heart leapt. This was more than I'd expected. An acknowledgement that something was wrong. The foundation takes such matters very seriously. She continued, I've instructed our legal team to conduct a thorough investigation. And my scholarship, I pressed. As I explained yesterday, this year's funds have been allocated. They cannot be retrieved. She held up a hand as I began to protest. However, I believe we can find an alternative solution. She slid a leather portfolio across the table. Inside was a formal letter on Wellington Foundation letterhead. The foundation is prepared to offer you a different scholarship, the Wellington Merit Award. It would cover your full tuition at Stanford, beginning this fall. I scanned the document, searching for catches or conditions. This appears to be identical to the original scholarship. Functionally, yes. Different funding source, same outcome. This seemed too easy. And in exchange, Mrs. Wellington's expression remained impassive. Your discretion. The situation with the original scholarship will be handled internally. No public statements. No further accusations against specific individuals. The implication was clear. Take the money and stay quiet about who might have been responsible. I considered my position carefully. The offer would solve my immediate problem. My education would be fully funded, but it would also shield whoever had committed fraud from any real consequences. The moral compromise was significant. What about the investigation into who redirected my scholarship? I asked. Will that person be held accountable? Internal disciplinary measures will be taken where appropriate, she replied smoothly. The foundation values its integrity, non-committal corporate speak. I wasn't satisfied, but I also recognized the power imbalance at play. Pushing too hard might result in losing this alternative offer. I'll need time to consider this, I said finally. Of course. We can allow 24 hours for your decision. She gestured to the breakfast that had been quietly served during our conversation. Please, eat. The chef here makes an excellent quiche. The sudden shift to mundane pleasantries was disorienting. But I picked up my fork, buying time to gather my thoughts. Tell me, Ms. Chen, Mrs. Wellington said between bites of her own breakfast. What do you intend to study at Stanford? Environmental engineering, with a focus on urban sustainability. I replied automatically, a growing field, and after graduation, graduate work most likely. My ultimate goal is to design infrastructure solutions for climate change adaptation in vulnerable coastal cities. She nodded approvingly. Ambitious. The kind of forward-thinking work the Wellington Scholarship was designed to support. She dabbed her lips with a napkin. Which makes the attempt to redirect your funding all the more troubling. The admission caught me off guard. So you do believe it was deliberate? Her eyes met mine. Let's just say that after reviewing the documents you provided, I have concerns about how this situation was handled. Before I could press further, the door opened and Dr. Elizabeth Wellington Pierce strode in. Grandmother, I wasn't aware you had a breakfast meeting. She stopped, abruptly upon seeing me, her expression cooling. Ms. Chen, I'm surprised to find you here. I invited her. Mrs. Wellington replied calmly. We're discussing the irregularities with her scholarship. Dr. Wellington Pierce's posture stiffened. She was striking in person, tall and polished, with chestnut hair pulled into a sleek knot, and sharp green eyes that assessed me with barely disguised hostility. I see. Perhaps I should join you then, since I oversee the scholarship selection process. That won't be necessary, her grandmother replied. We're nearly finished. A tense silence followed, charged with unspoken family dynamics. Actually, I ventured, since Dr. Wellington Pierce is here, I do have a question about the selection process. Mrs. Wellington raised an eyebrow, but nodded for me to continue. I turned to Dr. Wellington Pierce. In your professional capacity, have you ever authorized the redirection of a Wellington scholarship from its original recipient to another student? Her smile was frigid. Absolutely not. The selection process is rigorous and final. Then you weren't aware of the family allocation program referenced in these documents? I opened my folder, sliding out the papers bearing her signature. Dr. Wellington Pierce barely glanced at them. There is no such program. Any documentation suggesting otherwise is fraudulent. Her gaze flicked to her grandmother. I'm surprised you're entertaining these accusations. I'm gathering information. Elizabeth, Mrs. Wellington replied evenly. As should you be, given the seriousness of this situation. Something unspoken passed between them. A warning, perhaps, or a reminder of past conversations. Dr. Wellington Pierce turned back to me, her professional mask firmly in place. Ms. Chen, I sympathize with your disappointment, but I can assure you that I had nothing to do with any changes to your scholarship status. If there was some administrative error, I'm confident the Foundation will address it appropriately. She checked her watch. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with the selection committee for next year's scholars. After she left, Mrs. Wellington sipped her coffee thoughtfully. My granddaughter can be defensive when her professional judgment is questioned. Is that what's happening here? Her judgment being questioned, I asked. Or something more serious, Mrs. Wellington set down her cup with deliberate precision. What's happening, Ms. Chen, is that I'm offering you a solution that preserves your educational future while allowing the Foundation to address its internal matters privately. I suggest you consider it carefully. She stood, signaling that our meeting was over. The merit scholarship documents require your signature by this time tomorrow. If you wish to accept, my assistant will show you out. As I gathered my materials, she added, almost as an afterthought, you know, my late husband always said that true success requires knowing not just when to fight, but when to make strategic compromises. Food for thought, Ms. Chen. I nodded politely, but left with an uncomfortable feeling settling in my stomach. I'd been offered what I came for, funding for my education, but at the price of letting someone escape accountability for fraud. Was that a compromise I could live with? I barely slept that night, my mind racing through possible scenarios for the morning meeting. Was Mrs. Wellington genuinely interested in investigating the fraud? Or was this a strategic move to contain the situation? Was I walking into an opportunity or a trap? By morning, I'd settled on a plan. I would be direct but respectful, firm about my rights without making accusations I couldn't definitively prove. And most importantly, I would make it clear that I had secured evidence beyond what I'd shown her. The Wellington Foundation offices occupied an elegant sandstone building near the heart of campus. Inside, the decor balanced traditional academic gravitas with modern efficiency, gleaming wood paneling alongside state-of-the-art technology. Oil portraits of donors gazing down at ergonomic workstations. A receptionist escorted me to a private dining room where Mrs. Wellington was already seated at a table set for breakfast. She wore a different suit today, navy blue with subtle gold accents, but the same air of unassailable authority. You're punctual, she observed as I entered. A quality I appreciate. I took the seat across from her, placing my folder on the table beside me. Thank you for meeting with me. A server appeared silently, pouring coffee, and then disappearing. Mrs. Wellington took a measured sip before speaking. I've reviewed our records concerning your scholarship, Ms. Chen. Your academic credentials are indeed exceptional. Perfect SAT scores, 4.0 GPA, remarkable extracurriculars, including your research on sustainable urban development that won the National Science Foundation's Young Innovator Award. She set down her cup. You were, by all objective measures, ideal Wellington scholar. The past tense stung, but I kept my expression neutral. Then you understand why I'm pursuing this matter so vigorously. I do. What I don't understand is why you believe my granddaughter is involved. Her tone remained conversational, but her eyes were sharp. Elizabeth has devoted her career to expanding educational opportunities. The idea that she would divert scholarship funds is difficult to reconcile. I'm not here to make accusations without evidence. I replied carefully. The documents my parents received used Dr. Wellington Pierce's electronic signature and professional credentials. Whether she was directly involved or someone misappropriated her identity is something I can't determine. A reasonable position. Mrs. Wellington nodded slightly. After our conversation last night, I made some inquiries. There are indeed irregularities in how your scholarship was handled. My heart leapt. This was more than I'd expected, an acknowledgement that something was wrong. The Foundation takes such matters very seriously. She continued, I've instructed our legal team to conduct a thorough investigation, and my scholarship, I pressed. As I explained yesterday, this year's funds have been allocated. They cannot be retrieved. She held up a hand as I began to protest. However, I believe we can find an alternative solution. She slid a leather portfolio across the table. Inside was a formal letter on Wellington Foundation letterhead. The Foundation is prepared to offer you a different scholarship, the Wellington Merit Award. It would cover your full tuition at Stanford, beginning this fall. I scanned the document, searching for catches or conditions. This appears to be identical to the original scholarship. Functionally, yes. Different funding source. Same outcome. This seemed too easy. And in exchange, Mrs. Wellington's expression remained impassive. Your discretion. The situation with the original scholarship will be handled internally. No public statements. No further accusations against specific individuals. The implication was clear. Take the money and stay quiet about who might have been responsible. I considered my position carefully. The offer would solve my immediate problem. My education would be fully funded. But it would also shield whoever had committed fraud from any real consequences. The moral compromise was significant. What about the investigation into who redirected my scholarship? I asked. Will that person be held accountable?
Internal disciplinary measures will be taken where appropriate, she replied smoothly. The Foundation values its integrity. Non-committal corporate speak. I wasn't satisfied, but I also recognized the power imbalance at play. Pushing too hard might result in losing this alternative offer. I'll need time to consider this, I said finally. Of course, we can allow 24 hours for your decision. She gestured to the breakfast that had been quietly served during our conversation. Please eat. The chef here makes an excellent quiche. The sudden shift to mundane pleasantries was disorienting, but I picked up my fork, buying time to gather my thoughts. Tell me, Ms. Chen, Mrs. Wellington said between bites of her own breakfast, what do you intend to study at Stanford? Environmental engineering with a focus on urban sustainability, I replied automatically. A growing field. And after graduation? Graduate work, most likely. My ultimate goal is to design infrastructure solutions for climate change adaptation in vulnerable coastal cities. She nodded approvingly. Ambitious. The kind of forward-thinking work the Wellington Scholarship was designed to support. She dabbed her lips with a napkin. Which makes the attempt to redirect your funding all the more troubling. The admission caught me off guard. So you do believe it was deliberate? Her eyes met mine. Let's just say that after reviewing the documents you provided, I have concerns about how this situation was handled. Before I could press further, the door opened, and Dr. Elizabeth Wellington Pierce strode in. Grandmother, I wasn't aware you had a breakfast meeting. She stopped, abruptly upon seeing me, her expression cooling. Ms. Chen, I'm surprised to find you here. I invited her, Mrs. Wellington replied calmly. We're discussing the irregularities with her scholarship. Dr. Wellington Pierce's posture stiffened. She was striking in person, tall and polished, with chestnut hair pulled into a sleek knot and sharp green eyes that assessed me with barely disguised hostility. I see. Perhaps I should join you then, since I oversee the scholarship selection process. That won't be necessary, her grandmother replied. We're nearly finished. A tense silence followed, charged with unspoken family dynamics. Actually, I ventured, since Dr. Wellington Pierce is here, I do have a question about the selection process. Mrs. Wellington raised an eyebrow, but nodded for me to continue. I turned to Dr. Wellington Pierce. In your professional capacity, have you ever authorized the redirection of a Wellington scholarship from its original recipient to another student? Her smile was frigid. Absolutely not. The selection process is rigorous and final. Then you weren't aware of the family allocation program referenced in these documents? I opened my folder, sliding out the papers bearing her signature. Dr. Wellington Pierce barely glanced at them. There is no such program. Any documentation suggesting otherwise is fraudulent. Her gaze flicked to her grandmother. I'm surprised you're entertaining these accusations. I'm gathering information. Elizabeth, Mrs. Wellington replied evenly, as should you be, given the seriousness of this situation. Something unspoken passed between them. A warning, perhaps, or a reminder of past conversations. Dr. Wellington Pierce turned back to me, her professional mask firmly in place. Ms. Chen, I sympathize with your disappointment, but I can assure you that I had nothing to do with any changes to your scholarship status. If there was some administrative error, I'm confident the Foundation will address it appropriately. She checked her watch. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with the selection committee for next year's scholars. After she left, Mrs. Wellington sipped her coffee thoughtfully. My granddaughter can be defensive when her professional judgment is questioned. Is that what's happening here? Her judgment being questioned? I asked. Or something more serious? Mrs. Wellington set down her cup with deliberate precision. What's happening, Ms. Chen, is that I'm offering you a solution that preserves your educational future while allowing the Foundation to address its internal matters privately. I suggest you consider it carefully. She stood, signaling that our meeting was over. The merit scholarship documents require your signature by this time tomorrow if you wish to accept. My assistant will show you out. As I gathered my materials, she added, almost as an afterthought, You know, my late husband always said that true success requires knowing not just when to fight, but when to make strategic compromises. Food for thought, Ms. Chen. I nodded politely, but left with an uncomfortable feeling settling in my stomach. I'd been offered what I came for, funding for my education, but at the price of letting someone escape accountability for fraud. Was that a compromise I could live with? I spent the afternoon wandering Stanford's campus, weighing my options. The rational choice was clear: accept the merit scholarship, secure my education, and move forward. The Wellington Foundation was offering me exactly what I'd lost, just under a different name. Most people would consider this a win, but something kept nagging at me. If I accepted this compromise, I'd be tacitly agreeing to bury the truth. Someone had deliberately manipulated my parents, stolen my scholarship, and was now being protected by institutional power. The injustice of it burned. I found myself in the university library, seeking the quiet to think. As I settled into a study, corral in a remote corner, My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. How did the meeting go? Any news? I hadn't told my parents about the merit scholarship offer yet. They'd be thrilled, of course. Problem solved, future secured, time to move on. I started typing a reply when a voice interrupted my thoughts. You're Abigail Chen, right? I looked up to see a young woman about my age, petite with dark curly hair and glasses, standing by my Carol. Yes? She glanced around nervously before sliding into the chair across from me. My name's Maya Rodriguez. I'm one of the Wellington Scholars. Or I was supposed to be. My eyebrows shot up. What do you mean, supposed to be? Last month, I received my acceptance letter from the Wellington Foundation. Full ride. She lowered her voice. 3 days later, my parents got an email about some family allocation nonsense. Next thing I knew, my scholarship had been redirected to my brother. A chill ran through me. The same thing happened to me. Maya nodded grimly. I thought so. When I saw you at the reception last night, I recognized you from the original acceptance materials they sent. They included profiles of all 5 recipients. But then you disappeared, and Dr. Pierce announced you had declined the scholarship. I didn't decline anything, I said indignantly. My scholarship was fraudulently redirected. Mine too. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through emails. Look familiar? She showed me communications identical to what my parents had received. The same letterhead, the same language about family educational opportunities, the same electronic signature. Have you spoken to the foundation about this? I asked. I tried. Got nowhere. Just form responses about how scholarship decisions are final. She hesitated. Then yesterday, I got a call from Mrs. Wellington herself. She invited me to breakfast. Tomorrow to discuss my situation. The parallel was striking. Did she say anything about a merit scholarship? Maya's eyes widened. How did you know? She mentioned something about an alternative funding option that would be presented at the meeting. My mind raced. If Maya had experienced the same situation, this wasn't a one-off error. It was a pattern. Maya, how many Wellington Scholars? Are there supposed to be this year? 5. It's always 5. And do you know who the others are? She nodded. They sent us a welcome packet with everyone's bios. I still have it. She pulled up photos of 5 students on her phone. Herself, me, and 3 others I didn't recognize. Have you met any of these other students at the events this weekend? I asked. Maya frowned, thinking. Just Elliot Thompson. He's the tall guy with the red hair. The other 2 haven't been at any functions. This was getting stranger by the minute. We need to find out if they experienced the same thing. Can you contact Elliot? Already have his number. We hit it off last night. She fired off a quick text. While we waited for his response, I shared my encounter with Mrs. Wellington and her offer of the merit scholarship. So she's trying to buy us off, Maya concluded. Keep us quiet about whatever's happening. That's my guess. But why? The Wellington Foundation is one of the most respected educational institutions in the country. Why risk that reputation with some strange scholarship-switching scheme? Maya's phone chimed with a response from Elliot. Her expression darkened as she read it. He says his scholarship is fine. He's attending the formal dinner tomorrow night where they'll officially announce all recipients. That didn't fit the pattern. Maybe not all scholarships were targeted, I suggested. Or maybe his parents didn't take the bait, Maya countered. Mine almost didn't. My dad thought the email seemed fishy, but my mom was convinced it was legitimate. They argued about it for days. A new thought struck me. Maya, what does your brother do? He's at NYU for film school, struggling to pay for it. It's crazy expensive. And the redirected funds were supposedly going there? She nodded. That was the pitch, that we could help Miguel finish his degree without crushing debt. My sister was headed to Juilliard's pre-college program, I shared. The money was supposedly going there. We looked at each other as the pattern emerged. Arts programs. Expensive, prestigious arts programs that wouldn't typically qualify for the science and technology-focused grants the Wellington Foundation usually supported. "We need to check the other recipients," I said decisively. "And we need to find out where the money is really going." Maya was already tapping on her phone. "I can try to reach out to the other 2 scholars from the welcome packet, but how do we track the money?" "I'm working on that," I assured her, though I wasn't entirely sure how I'd accomplish it. "In the meantime, don't accept any alternative offers from the foundation yet. Tell them you need more time," she nodded. "What about tonight's reception? Are you going?" "I wasn't planning to. After last night, I got the impression I wasn't welcome." "You should come," Maya insisted. "As my guest, I want to introduce you to Elliot, and there's a chance the other scholars might be there." She paused. "Plus, Dr. Pierce will be giving a presentation on the Foundation's new initiatives. Might be interesting to hear what she has to say." The thought of facing Dr. Wellington Pierce again made my stomach twist. But Maya was right. This was an opportunity to gather more information. "Okay," I agreed. "I'll be there." We spent the next hour strategizing, comparing notes about our scholarship situations, and researching the Wellington Foundation's structure and leadership. Maya, it turned out, was a computer science prodigy who had developed a machine learning algorithm for early detection of cyber attacks. She had the technical skills I lacked. "I might be able to trace the money if I can get into the Foundation system," she mused. "Isn't that highly illegal?" She grinned. "Only if we get caught. Besides, we're not changing anything, just looking." I wasn't entirely comfortable with this approach, but I couldn't deny the appeal of concrete evidence. "Let's hold that as a last resort," I suggested. As we parted ways to prepare for the evening reception, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. And with each new piece of information, the picture became clearer. This wasn't just about my scholarship or Maya's. Something systematic was happening at the Wellington Foundation, and we were going to uncover it. The reception that evening was held in Stanford's Art Museum, a modern space filled with abstract sculptures and dramatic lighting. I arrived as Maya's +1, trying to project confidence despite feeling distinctly unwelcome after yesterday's ejection. We spotted Elliot Thompson immediately. His height and vibrant red hair made him stand out in any crowd. Maya made the introductions, and I studied him carefully as we exchanged pleasantries. He seemed genuine in his enthusiasm about the scholarship, completely unaware of any controversy. "It's weird they announced you withdrew," he commented when Maya explained my situation. "The foundation made a big deal about how the 5 recipients were selected from thousands of applicants through this rigorous process." "I didn't withdraw," I clarified. "My scholarship was redirected without my consent." His brow furrowed. "That doesn't make any sense. Why would they—" He was interrupted by the gentle chiming of a glass, signaling the start of formal remarks. The crowd quieted as Dr. Elizabeth Wellington Pierce took the small stage at the front of the room. Distinguished guests, faculty, and most importantly, our exceptional Wellington scholars, she began, her polished voice carrying effortlessly through the space. "Tonight, we celebrate not just academic excellence, but visionary potential." As she continued with practiced platitudes about educational opportunity and meritocracy, I scanned the room. Mrs. Wellington stood near the back, observing everything with those penetrating blue eyes. When our gazes met, she gave me a small nod of recognition, her expression unreadable. "This year marks an exciting expansion of the Foundation's mission," Dr. Wellington Pierce was saying. "In addition to our traditional scholarships, we're launching the Wellington Arts Initiative, bringing our commitment to excellence into new creative domains." Maya and I exchanged a look. Arts Initiative. The connection to our redirected scholarships couldn't be coincidental. The first phase of this initiative will provide funding to selected programs at Juilliard, NYU's Tisch School of the Arts, and Rhode Island School of Design, Dr. Wellington Pierce continued. The exact institutions where our redirected scholarships had supposedly gone. None of this was mentioned in the Foundation's annual report, Maya whispered. This is brand new. As Dr. Wellington Pierce concluded her remarks to polite applause, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to find Mrs. Wellington's assistant, a severe-looking woman in rimless glasses. Ms. Chen. Mrs. Wellington would like a word. I followed her. Through the crowd to a quiet alcove where the family matriarch waited. I see you found Ms. Rodriguez, Mrs. Wellington observed without preamble. And compared notes, I presume. There was no point denying it. Yes, she sighed, looking suddenly older. I had hoped you would simply accept the merit scholarship and move forward. It would have been simpler for everyone. Simpler, maybe, but not right. Right and wrong are rarely as clear-cut as the young believe them to be, Ms. Chen. She gazed past me toward her granddaughter, still surrounded by admirers. I need more time to address this situation properly. Accept the merit scholarship, attend Stanford. Allow me to handle the internal investigation. And Maya? Does she get a merit scholarship too? And what about any other students whose scholarships were redirected? All legitimate candidates will be accommodated, she assured me. It was tempting. So tempting. But something still didn't add up. The Arts Initiative, I said. Is it real? A flicker of something, respect perhaps, crossed her face. You're very observant, Ms. Chen. Yes, it's real, and long overdue in my opinion. But not funded the way Dr. Wellington Pierce implied, I pressed. Mrs. Wellington's gaze hardened. 24 hours, Ms. Chen. You have my offer. I suggest you take it, before circumstances change in ways neither of us can control. It was clearly a dismissal, and possibly a threat. I rejoined Maya and Elliot, my mind whirling with new questions and growing suspicions. What did she want? Maya asked. To remind me of her offer, I replied. And to warn me, I think. Elliot looked between us, confused. What's really going on here? We're not entirely sure yet, I admitted, but I think we're getting closer to the truth. What I didn't say was that the truth seemed increasingly dangerous, and that Mrs. Wellington's warning had left me with a growing sense of unease. We weren't just uncovering an administrative error or even a simple case of fraud. We were pulling on threads that could potentially unravel one of the most powerful educational foundations in the country. And someone was definitely feeling threatened. After the reception, Maya, Elliot, and I retreated to a 24-hour coffee shop near campus to compare notes and strategize. Elliot, now fully briefed on our situations, was both shocked and intrigued. So you think Dr. Wellington Pierce is stealing scholarship money to fund her new arts initiative? He asked, keeping his voice low despite the nearly empty cafe. It fits the pattern, I replied. The redirected scholarships supposedly went to arts programs, the same ones she just announced partnerships with, and Mrs. Wellington seemed uncomfortable when I brought it up. But why? Elliot pressed. The Wellington Foundation has billions. Why risk everything to siphon off a few scholarships? Maya tapped her fingers thoughtfully against her coffee cup. Maybe the family didn't approve the arts initiative. Maybe Dr. Pierce is funding it behind their backs. Or maybe it's not about money at all, I suggested. Maybe it's about control or recognition. The foundation has always focused on STEM fields. That was Mr. Wellington's passion. Perhaps Dr. Pierce wanted to establish her own legacy but couldn't get official approval. Elliot nodded slowly. That tracks with the rumors about her. She's supposedly been fighting for years to modernize the foundation, but keeps getting overruled by the old guard. What rumors? I asked. My dad's on Stanford's development committee, Elliot explained. He hears things. Apparently there's a major power struggle happening at the Wellington Foundation. Mrs. Wellington is technically retired, but she still controls most of the voting shares and has final say on major initiatives. Dr. Pierce has been trying to take over for years, building her own faction within the organization. This added a new dimension to our understanding. So redirecting these scholarships could be Dr. Pierce's way of funding her pet project without official authorization, I mused. But how would she hide it from the foundation's financial oversight? Maya wondered. They must have audits, board, reviews? The Wellington family controls the board, Elliot pointed out. Maybe the oversight isn't as rigorous as we'd assume. Or maybe she found a way to make the numbers look legitimate, I suggested. If the redirected funds went to the same schools but different departments, it might not raise immediate red flags. Maya's eyes suddenly lit up. I have an idea. She pulled out her laptop and began typing rapidly. Every nonprofit has to file public tax forms, Form 990s. They show financial details, program expenses, executive compensation. She turned the screen toward us. Here's the Wellington Foundation's most recent filing. We huddled around the laptop, scanning through pages of financial data. Maya pointed to a section labeled Program Service Accomplishments. Look at this. Last year, they launched a pilot program called the Educational Innovation Fund. Vague. Name, minimal description, but it got $2.3 million in funding. That's enough to cover several redirected scholarships, Elliot observed. And guess who's listed as the program director? Maya scrolled down to reveal Dr. Wellington Pierce's name. This could be our smoking gun, I said excitedly. Not quite, Maya cautioned. This just shows she controls an ambiguously named fund. We'd need to prove the redirected scholarships actually went into this account. And then trace where the money went afterward, Elliot added. I might be able to help with that, said a new voice. We all jumped, looking up to find a barista standing by our table, a young man with a Stanford employee badge still clipped to his shirt. Sorry, I couldn't help overhearing, he said, glancing around the empty cafe. I'm a law student here, working nights, but I also intern at the Foundation's legal department. We stared at him, uncertain whether to panic or celebrate this potential stroke of luck. I'm Raj, he continued, pulling up a chair without waiting for an invitation. And I think I can fill in some gaps in your investigation. What do you know? I asked cautiously. I know that 3 days ago, the legal department went into crisis mode over scholarship irregularities. I know that Dr. Pierce has been holding closed-door meetings with her personal legal team, separate from the Foundation's counsel. And I know that Mrs. Wellington requested all files related to something called the Family Allocation Program, which officially doesn't exist. His information aligned perfectly with what we'd discovered. Why are you telling us this? Maya asked, skepticism evident in her voice. Raj's expression turned grim. Because I was supposed to start at the Foundation full-time after graduation. My offer was rescinded last week with no explanation. Then yesterday, I overheard Dr. Pierce's assistant saying they'd dealt with the Rodriguez and Chen situations. He looked at Maya and me in turn. That's you two, right? We nodded. I think you're onto something big, Raj continued. And I think I'm collateral damage in whatever's happening. I want to help. The four of us spent the next hour sharing information, filling in the gaps in our collective knowledge. Raj confirmed that the Foundation's legal team was concerned about potential fraud, but was being kept at arm's length from the actual investigation. They're worried about liability, he explained. If scholarship funds were misappropriated, donors could sue. By the time we left the cafe near midnight, we had developed a theory. Dr. Wellington Pierce had created the fictitious Family Allocation program to redirect scholarship funds to her pet arts initiative, bypassing the Foundation's normal approval process. The question remained, how extensive was the scheme and who else knew about it? Tomorrow's the final day of the Scholars' Weekend, Elliot reminded us. The formal dinner with the Wellington family. That's our last chance to gather evidence, before everyone disperses. And my deadline to accept or reject the merit scholarship, I added. We parted ways with a plan to meet again in the morning. As I walked back to my guest accommodations, I felt a strange mix of anxiety and exhilaration. We were close to uncovering the truth, but would it be enough to restore what had been taken from us? I woke to an urgent text from Maya. Emergency meeting, Foundation offices, 8 a.m. No explanation, no details. Just those 9 words that sent my pulse racing. I dressed quickly and hurried across campus, the morning fog still clinging to the grounds. When I arrived at the Wellington Foundation building, Maya was pacing outside, her expression tense. "What's happening?" I asked. Raj called me at dawn. He was doing some late-night digging in the Foundation's digital archives and found something major. She lowered her voice. The family allocation program isn't new. It's been operating for at least 3 years. 3 years? I repeated, stunned. So this isn't just about our scholarships. Not even close. Raj estimates at least 15 scholarships have been reallocated during that time. The scale of the fraud was staggering. If each scholarship was worth the same as mine, over $70,000 per year for 4 years, we were potentially looking at millions of dollars diverted from deserving students. "Where's Raj now?" I asked. "Inside, waiting for us. He's using his intern badge while he still can." We entered the building, trying to appear casual. The morning receptionist waved us through after Raj called down, and we took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Raj met us in a small conference room, his normally neat appearance disheveled from what was clearly an all-night research session. "I've been compiling evidence," he said without preamble, gesturing to his laptop. "The Family Allocation Program was created 3 years ago, right after Dr. Pierce was appointed to the Foundation's executive committee. He showed us internal memos, budget allocations, and a spreadsheet tracking redirected educational resources. The genius of it was keeping it small enough to fly under the radar," Raj explained. "Just 3 to 5 scholarships per year, always with the same cover story, helping siblings in arts programs that the Foundation wouldn't normally support." "But where did the money actually go?" I asked. Raj's expression turned grim. "That's where it gets complicated. Some of it did go to arts programs, just not to the siblings named in the documentation. Instead, it went to an initiative called Future Arts Leaders, which funded select students at prestigious institutions." "Dr. Pierce's personal pet project," Maya surmised. Raj nodded. "But here's the kicker. Dr. Pierce sits on the admissions committees for these programs. She's personally selecting which students receive this diverted funding. Buying influence, I realized. She's using Wellington money to curry favor with top arts institutions. Building her own power base outside the Foundation's traditional focus," Raj agreed. "But that's not all. Some of the redirected funds, about 30%, went to a consulting company called Artemis Cultural Strategies." He pulled up a corporate registration document. The company's listed officers included an Eliza Pierce. "That's Dr. Wellington Pierce," I said. "She's paying herself with diverted scholarship money." Maya studied the documents. "This is blatant self-dealing. It's not just unethical, it's illegal." Why hasn't anyone caught this before? I wondered. "The Foundation's financial oversight is fragmented by design," Raj explained. "Different committees handle different types of grants, and the family members have tremendous autonomy. As long as the overall budget numbers balanced, no one looked too closely at the details. Until Mrs. Wellington started asking questions," Maya added. "Exactly," Raj confirmed. "Something triggered her suspicion recently. That's why the legal department went into crisis mode. She started demanding documentation about programs she'd never authorized." This explained Mrs. Wellington's careful response to my accusations and her desire to handle things internally. She was already investigating her granddaughter, perhaps trying to contain the damage to the family and Foundation's reputation. "What do we do with this information?" Maya asked. Before anyone could answer, the conference room door opened. We all froze as Mrs. Wellington herself walked in, immaculately dressed and utterly unsurprised to find us there. "I thought I might find you here," she said calmly. Mr. Singh's badge access was flagged at 4:30 this morning. Unusual for an intern, who was supposedly terminated last week. Raj paled but stood his ground. Ma'am, I can explain. No need, she interrupted, closing the door behind her. I'm well aware of what you've been investigating. In fact, I've been hoping someone would uncover the truth. She turned to me. Though I didn't expect it to be a rejected scholarship recipient and her friends. Not rejected, I corrected firmly. Defrauded. Indeed. She pulled out a chair and sat, indicating we should do the same. What you've discovered is, unfortunately, accurate. My granddaughter has been misappropriating foundation funds for several years through this fictitious family allocation program. The blunt admission stunned us into momentary silence. You knew? Maya finally asked. Not initially, Mrs. Wellington replied. Elizabeth has always been ambitious, determined to make her own mark on the foundation. I respected that, even when I disagreed with her focus on arts funding over my husband's preferred STEM initiatives. Her expression hardened. But I never imagined she would resort to fraud. When did you find out? I asked. I began to suspect something last year when a former scholarship recipient contacted me directly, confused about why his award had been changed. I initiated a discreet review, but Elizabeth controlled most of the documentation. It wasn't until your situation, Ms. Chen, and yours, Ms. Rodriguez, that I had enough concrete evidence to confront her. And have you? Confronted her? Raj asked. Mrs. Wellington's gaze was steely. That conversation is scheduled for this afternoon, after I've reviewed all the evidence, including what you've compiled, Mr. Singh. He hesitated, then pushed his laptop toward her. Everything I found is here. Thank you. She glanced at the screen briefly. This will be helpful in ensuring there are appropriate consequences. What kind of consequences? I asked, not entirely trusting her intentions. Will Dr. Pierce face criminal charges? Mrs. Wellington's expression remained carefully neutral. My priority is ensuring that students like you and Ms. Rodriguez receive the education you earned. Beyond that, the foundation must maintain its integrity and donors' trust. Corporate speak again, avoiding the direct question of whether her granddaughter would face real justice. With all due respect, Maya said firmly, this isn't just about our scholarships anymore. This is systematic fraud that's harmed numerous students. Offering us alternative funding doesn't solve the underlying problem. Ms. Rodriguez, I understand your concern, Mrs. Wellington replied. But there are many considerations here, including the foundation's ongoing ability to support future students. A public scandal could devastate our fundraising efforts. So Dr. Pierce gets away with it? I challenged. Continues in her position with maybe a slap on the wrist? That is not what I said. For the first time, Mrs. Wellington's composure cracked slightly. Elizabeth will no longer have any role at the foundation. That decision has already been made. But no criminal charges, Raj noted. No public accountability. Mrs. Wellington studied us, her expression calculating. What would you suggest? Destroy the foundation's reputation? End scholarships for hundreds of future students to punish one person? It was a powerful argument, appealing to our sense of the greater good. But it also felt like manipulation. There must be a middle ground, I insisted. One that holds Dr. Pierce accountable while protecting the foundation's mission. Perhaps there is, Mrs. Wellington conceded. And I'm open to discussing it. After you sign the confidentiality agreements my assistant is bringing. The three of us exchanged glances, recognizing the trap closing around us. She was offering to include us in the resolution, but only if we agreed to stay silent about what we'd discovered. Before we could respond, Mrs. Wellington's phone chimed. She checked it, her expression tightening imperceptibly. Excuse me, I need to take this. She stepped out of the room, closing the door behind her. This is exactly how cover-ups happen, Maya whispered urgently. She gets us to sign NDAs, handles everything internally, and the public never knows. But if we don't sign, we lose any influence over the outcome, Raj countered, and possibly our scholarships. There's another option, I said slowly, an idea, forming. We go public now, before we sign anything. How? Maya asked. We can't exactly call a press conference. I pulled out my phone. No, but I know someone who would be very interested in this story. As I dialed the number of my hometown's most ambitious local journalist, a family friend who'd always dreamed of breaking a national story, I knew we were crossing a line. Mrs. Wellington would see it as a betrayal of her offered compromise. Dr. Wellington Pierce would become a pariah in academic circles, and the foundation that bore the family name would face a reckoning it might not survive intact. But sometimes, I realized, the right choice isn't the easiest or most pragmatic one. Sometimes justice requires discomfort, even risk. My parents had been manipulated into signing away my future. I wouldn't allow myself to be manipulated into silence about it. As the phone rang, I made eye contact with Maya and Raj, giving them one last chance to object. They both nodded firmly, a united front against institutional cover-up. Kelly Hudson, Westfield Chronicle, answered the voice on the other end. Kelly, it's Abigail Chen. I have a story you'll want to hear. It involves the Wellington Foundation, millions in misappropriated scholarship funds, and a cover-up in progress right now. There was no going back now. The truth would finally come to light, regardless of the consequences. Kelly's journalistic instincts kicked in immediately. I need details, Abby. Names, dates, evidence, and I need to know why you're involved. I'm one of the victims, I explained, giving her a concise overview of how my scholarship had been fraudulently redirected. But it's much bigger than just me. We have documentation showing this has been happening for years. Send me everything you've got, Kelly instructed. I'll need to verify independently, but if this checks out, it's potentially national news. Raj was already copying files to a secure cloud drive. I'll have to explain how I obtained these documents, he warned. It could complicate my legal career. Only if you're identified, Kelly said, overhearing him. I can protect my sources. As we prepared to send the evidence, the conference room door opened. Mrs. Wellington returned, her expression unreadable as she noted my phone still at my ear. Who are you speaking with, Ms. Chen? She asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. I lowered the phone slightly, but didn't end the call. Kelly Hudson from the Westfield Chronicle. I'm providing her with details about the scholarship. Fraud. For a moment, the formidable matriarch seemed at a loss for words. Then her shoulders straightened, and she did something entirely unexpected. She pulled out a chair and sat down. Miss Hudson, she said, raising her voice slightly to ensure she'd be heard through the phone. This is Eleanor Wellington. I believe we should discuss this situation properly. May I suggest a formal interview in 1 hour? My office with all relevant parties present. I stared at her in disbelief. This wasn't the reaction I'd anticipated. Mrs. Wellington, Kelly responded, professional despite her obvious surprise. I'd welcome that opportunity. Should I understand that you're not disputing Ms. Chen's allegations? I'm not, Mrs. Wellington confirmed. What I dispute is the characterization that the Wellington Foundation is attempting a cover-up. We are actively addressing the situation, and I'm prepared to discuss that process on the record. After arranging the details with Kelly, I ended the call, studying Mrs. Wellington cautiously. I don't understand. You just offered us confidentiality agreements and now you're willing to go on the record. Circumstances changed during my phone call, she replied, an edge of steel in her voice. I've just learned that Elizabeth has been attempting to transfer an additional $4.7 million from foundation accounts this morning. She must have realized we were closing in. Did she succeed? Maya asked. No, our CFO flagged the transaction and froze her access. Mrs. Wellington's composure slipped momentarily, revealing genuine anger. This desperation changes my calculation. The foundation's reputation will suffer less from transparency than from the appearance of enabling or concealing fraud. It was a pragmatic decision, not a moral epiphany, but I still felt a surge of respect for her adaptability. Many in her position would have doubled down on containment. "What happens now?" Raj asked. "Now we prepare for a controlled disclosure," Mrs. Wellington replied. "The Foundation will announce an internal investigation, cooperate with authorities, and make restitution to affected students." She fixed her gaze on me. "Including immediate reinstatement of your original scholarships." "And Dr. Wellington Pierce?" I pressed. "Will face appropriate consequences," she stated firmly, "which may well include criminal charges given this latest development." The next few hours were a whirlwind. Kelly arrived with a photographer, conducting a formal interview in Mrs. Wellington's elegant office. The family matriarch was remarkably forthcoming, providing a detailed timeline of events and taking responsibility for the Foundation's inadequate oversight while making it clear that her granddaughter had acted without authorization. "The Wellington Foundation has supported educational excellence for 50 years, she concluded. "One individual's actions, however disappointing, do not define our mission or our future commitment to deserving students." It was masterful damage control, I had to admit. By getting ahead of the story, acknowledging the problem, and promising specific remedies, Mrs. Wellington was salvaging what she could from the situation. After the interview concluded, she asked me to stay behind. "You chose a bold strategy, Ms. Chen," she observed once we were alone. "It could have backfired spectacularly." "It was a risk," I acknowledged, "but less of one than trusting the process would work without public accountability." She studied me thoughtfully. "You know, when the Wellington Scholarship Committee selected you, they noted your exceptional analytical skills and moral courage in their assessment. I see now they were quite correct." She handed me an envelope. "Your original scholarship, reinstated in full. No conditions, no confidentiality clauses." I accepted it, still somewhat wary. "Thank you. And Maya? The other affected students?" "All will receive similar reinstatements," she assured me. "My assistant is contacting them now." "And the arts students who received the diverted funds?" "It's not their fault they were caught up in this." Something like approval flickered in her eyes. "Their funding will continue through legitimate foundation channels. I've never opposed arts education, merely the deceptive methods my granddaughter employed to fund it." As I turned to leave, she added, "The formal dinner is still scheduled for tonight. As a reinstated Wellington scholar, you're expected to attend." "After everything that's happened?" I asked, surprised. "Especially after everything that's happened," she replied firmly. "The Foundation must demonstrate continuity and commitment to its mission. Having you there, all of our legitimate scholars, sends that message clearly." I hesitated, then nodded my agreement. Despite everything, I was still a Wellington scholar. That identity, that achievement, was finally mine again, free of manipulation or compromise. Outside, I found Maya, Elliot, and Raj waiting anxiously. "It's done," I told them, showing them my reinstated scholarship. "We won." Maya's eyes welled with tears as she hugged me. "I can't believe it actually worked." "The story's going to break tomorrow morning," Raj informed us, checking his phone. "Kelly's editor is ecstatic. They're already getting interest from national outlets to pick it up." "What about Dr. Wellington Pierce?" Elliot asked. "Has anyone seen her?" As if in answer to his question, the Foundation's main doors burst open, and Dr. Wellington Pierce herself stormed out, followed by 2 security guards carrying boxes of her personal items. Her face was a mask of cold fury as she swept past us toward the parking lot. She paused briefly, her gaze locking with mine. "Congratulations, Ms. Chen," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "You've destroyed a visionary initiative that would have transformed arts education in this country." "No," I replied calmly. I helped expose fraud. There's a difference. Something dangerous flashed in her eyes, but the security guards moved closer, and she turned away, continuing toward her car without another word. That was intense, Elliot murmured as Dr. Wellington Pierce's vehicle screeched out of the parking lot. And possibly not the last we'll hear from her, Raj cautioned. People like that don't go down quietly. He was right, of course. The story was far from over. There would be investigations, possibly trials, certainly ongoing media attention. My name would be forever linked to the Wellington Foundation scandal. But as we walked across the sunlit campus, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. My future at Stanford was secure. The truth had come to light. And most importantly, a system that had been manipulated to serve the powerful was being reset to fulfill its original purpose, supporting deserving students regardless of wealth or connections. That evening, as I dressed for the formal dinner in the navy blue dress my parents had purchased with such hope and pride, I finally called home to update them. So we don't have to take out loans after all? Mom asked, her voice thick with emotion. After I explained everything. No loans, I confirmed. The original scholarship has been fully reinstated. And this journalist, she's publishing the whole story? With your name? Yes? Is that okay? I suddenly realized I should have consulted them before going public. There was a pause, then Dad's voice joined the call. Abigail, we couldn't be prouder, not just of your scholarship, but of your integrity. You stood up for what was right, even when it would have been easier to take the compromise. Their approval meant more than I could express. I learned it from you, I said simply. Not from us signing away your scholarship without asking, Mom said ruefully. You were manipulated. By experts, I reminded her. And when you realized what had happened, you told me immediately. That's integrity, too. After promising to call again after the dinner, I hung up and took one final look in the mirror. The person staring back wasn't just a scholarship recipient anymore. She was someone who had faced a powerful institution and held it accountable, someone who had chosen truth over expediency. As I headed downstairs to meet Maya and Elliot for the formal dinner, I reflected on how differently this weekend had turned out from what I'd expected. I'd arrived seeking to reclaim what was taken from me. But I was leaving with something more valuable, the knowledge that systems could be challenged, that truth could prevail, and that sometimes justice required nothing more and nothing less than the courage to speak up. The Wellington Scholarship would fund my education for the next 4 years. But this hard-won lesson in standing up to power, that would serve me for a lifetime. The Wellington Scholars Dinner was held in the university president's residence, a historic mansion nestled among ancient oak trees. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables adorned with fresh flowers and fine china. Under normal circumstances, I would have been intimidated by the opulence. Tonight, however, I walked in with my head high, flanked by Maya and Elliot. We were greeted at the entrance by Dr. Harrington, the academic director who had tried to dismiss me from the welcome reception. His attitude had undergone a remarkable transformation. Ms. Chen, Ms. Rodriguez, Mr. Thompson, he said, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Welcome. Mrs. Wellington has requested you be seated at the main table. All of us? Maya asked, raising an eyebrow. Yes, of course, he replied a little too quickly. As Wellington scholars, you deserve. That is, it's customary for. It's. Fine, Dr. Harrington, I said, taking pity on his discomfort. We understand the circumstances are unusual. He nodded gratefully and escorted us to our seats. The other 2 Wellington scholars, a young woman named Priya Patel and a young man named David Kim, were already seated, looking confused by the last-minute changes to the seating arrangement. Introductions were made, and I noticed Priya studying me with particular interest. You're the one who exposed the fraud, she said quietly as we took our seats. My parents got those emails too. about redirecting my scholarship to my brother's music conservatory. They almost signed the papers. What stopped them? I asked. Father's paranoia, she replied with a small smile. He doesn't trust anything he doesn't understand, and he definitely didn't understand why a science-focused foundation would suddenly care about my brother's cello career. So there had been even more potential victims. I wondered how many families had been approached but had declined to participate in the family allocation program. The dining room gradually filled with foundation board members, university officials, and major donors. The atmosphere was strained, with hushed conversations and sidelong glances in our direction. Everyone had clearly been briefed about the scandal, but instructed to maintain a facade of normalcy. Mrs. Wellington finally arrived, commanding attention without effort. She moved through the room with practiced grace, greeting guests and making introductions as if this were just another foundation event, not the aftermath of a major organizational crisis. When she reached our table, she took the seat at the head, directly across from me. "I'm pleased you could all join us this evening," she said, addressing the 5 scholarship recipients. "Despite today's revelations, this dinner remains a celebration of your exceptional achievements and potential. It was a masterclass in institutional damage control. Acknowledge the elephant in the room without allowing it to dominate the conversation." As servers presented the first course, Mrs. Wellington engaged each scholar in conversation about their academic interests and future plans. When she turned to me, her expression was carefully neutral. "Ms. Chen, I understand you've received several journalism inquiries since this afternoon. News traveled fast." "Yes, ma'am. The Chronicle piece is being picked up by national outlets. I expect they'll be contacting the foundation as well," she noted. "Our official statement will be released in the morning, but I want to be clear that we support your right to speak about your experience. It was a strategic concession. Better to appear transparent than to attempt suppressing my story, which would only fuel speculation about a cover-up." "Thank you," I replied. "I intend to focus on the outcome, that the foundation acted decisively once the fraud was discovered." She nodded appreciatively, recognizing the olive branch I was extending. The foundation's image would suffer less if the narrative emphasized their quick response rather than the years of inadequate oversight that had allowed the fraud to flourish. Dinner proceeded with strained politeness, the usual celebratory atmosphere notably absent. As dessert was served, Mrs. Wellington rose to deliver the traditional address to new scholarship recipients. "For 50 years, the Wellington Foundation has supported exceptional young scholars," she began, her voice steady and assured. "Today, that mission faced one of its greatest challenges, a betrayal of trust from within our own organization." A hush fell over the room. She wasn't going to sidestep the issue after all. "I will not insult your intelligence by pretending this is a normal evening, or that the foundation has not suffered a serious breach of its core values," she continued. "What happened was wrong. Students were deceived, families were manipulated, funds were misappropriated." She paused, surveying the room with those penetrating blue eyes. "But what defines an institution is not the mistakes it makes, but how it responds to them." Today, the Wellington Foundation recommits to its founding principles: integrity, transparency, and the advancement of knowledge through support of exceptional students like those before you. She gestured to our table. "These 5 scholars represent the best of what education can achieve, not just academic excellence, but moral courage. Ms. Chen and Ms. Rodriguez in particular have demonstrated that courage in holding this institution accountable." I felt a flush of surprise at the public acknowledgement. Moving forward, the foundation will implement new oversight measures, including independent auditing of all scholarship disbursements. We will make restitution to any student whose funding was improperly redirected, and most importantly, we will ensure that such a breach of trust can never happen again. It was an impressive performance. acknowledging wrongdoing while positioning the foundation as responsive and reform-minded. As Mrs. Wellington concluded her remarks to polite applause, I caught Maya's eye across the table. Her slight nod told me she was thinking the same thing. This was reputation management at its finest. After dinner, as guests mingled over coffee, Raj appeared at my elbow. Mrs. Wellington's assistant slipped me in through the side entrance, he explained when I expressed surprise at seeing him. She wanted me to give you this. He handed me a business card for a prestigious law firm with Jennifer Walsh, partner, printed beneath the firm's logo. On the back, someone had written, "Interested in discussing summer internship opportunities." "What's this about?" I asked. "Apparently, Mrs. Wellington was impressed by your handling of this situation," Raj replied. "She mentioned to Ms. Walsh that you showed exceptional promise in navigating complex ethical and legal scenarios. She's offering me a job?" I was skeptical. "After I helped expose fraud at her family's foundation?" "I think it's more that she respected how you did it," Raj suggested. "You could have gone straight to social media with accusations, but instead you gathered evidence, confronted the issue directly, and even gave the foundation a chance to address it properly." I tucked the card into my clutch, still uncertain how I felt about it. Was this a genuine recognition of my abilities, or an attempt to co-opt a potential critic? As the evening drew to a close, Mrs. Wellington approached me one final time. "Ms. Chen, before you leave, there's something I'd like you to have." She handed me a small velvet box. Inside was a gold pin bearing the Wellington Foundation crest, the traditional symbol given to scholarship recipients. "This was meant to be presented to you tonight regardless of circumstances," she explained. "You earned it through your academic achievements, not your investigative skills." I accepted it, strangely moved by the gesture. "Thank you. I understand you'll be returning home tomorrow before starting classes in the fall," she continued. "When you return to Stanford, I hope you'll consider taking an active role in the Foundation's reform efforts. We could use someone with your perspective on the scholarship committee." It was the last thing I'd expected, an invitation to help reshape the organization I'd challenged. Before I could respond, she added, "Think about it. We'll speak again in the fall." With a slight nod, she moved on to bid farewell to other guests, leaving me to consider this unexpected turn of events. Maya joined me as I was preparing to leave. "So," she said with a sidelong glance, "from scholarship recipient to whistleblower to potential reformer in the span of one weekend. Not bad, Chen." I laughed, the tension of the past few days finally beginning to dissipate. "Definitely not the college orientation experience I was expecting. Are you going to take her up on it? The committee position?" I looked across the room at Mrs. Wellington, now deep in conversation with university officials. "I'm not sure yet. Part of me thinks it's a brilliant opportunity to create real change. Another part wonders if it's just a sophisticated way to control the narrative." "Maybe it's both," Maya suggested pragmatically. "Either way, you've already accomplished something significant. The system tried to cheat you, and you refused to accept it." She was right. Whatever came next, whether I worked within the foundation or maintained my independence from it, I had stood up for myself and others. The scholarship that my parents had unknowingly signed away was mine again, secured by my own efforts. I left the dinner that night. I felt a profound sense of closure. The Wellington Scholars Weekend had been a trial by fire, forcing me to confront questions of justice, power, and personal integrity far beyond what I'd anticipated when I'd first opened that acceptance letter. I'd arrived seeking only to reclaim what was mine. I was leaving with that, and something more: the knowledge that systems, however powerful, were not impervious to challenge, and that one person's refusal to accept injustice could make a difference. It was perhaps the most valuable education I could have received before my college journey even began. My flight home the next morning was delayed, giving me time to read Kelly's article, which had just been published online. The headline was direct but fair. Wellington Foundation uncovers scholarship fraud, promises reform. Kelly had skillfully balanced the scandalous elements, a powerful family member diverting educational funds, with the foundation's swift corrective actions. The comment section, however, was already filling with more dramatic takes, ranging from conspiracy theories about the entire Wellington Empire to heartfelt support for the affected students. My name appeared repeatedly, sometimes characterized as a heroic whistleblower, other times as a privileged recipient who should just be grateful for any scholarship. I closed the browser, uncomfortable with both narratives. I wasn't a crusading hero, nor was I an entitled complainer. I was just someone who had refused to accept an injustice and had been fortunate enough to have evidence and assistance to make that refusal meaningful. My phone chimed with a text from Maya. "Have you seen Elliot's Instagram story, Dr. Pierce?" Gave a surprise exit interview to campus media. I hadn't. I quickly opened Instagram to find Elliot's story, which featured a video clip of Dr. Wellington Pierce speaking to a student reporter on the steps of the foundation building. "The Wellington Foundation has always struggled with innovation," she was saying, her voice controlled but with an undercurrent of bitterness. "My grandfather built something remarkable, but institutions calcify without new vision. The Arts Initiative represented that vision, a chance to expand our impact beyond the narrow STEM focus that has dominated for decades." The reporter's question was inaudible, but Dr. Pierce's response was clear. The methods were unorthodox, yes. But when conventional channels for change are blocked by entrenched power, sometimes alternative approaches become necessary. It was an astonishing statement, essentially admitting to the fraud while trying to reframe it as justified civil disobedience against institutional stagnation. He texted Maya back. "She's trying to control the narrative. Make herself a misunderstood visionary instead of a fraudster." Maya responded immediately. Classic move. But the financial evidence doesn't support her noble cause story. The money trail leads to personal benefit, not just arts programs. She was right. No amount of reputation management could erase the fact that Dr. Wellington Pierce had diverted scholarship funds to her own consulting company, personally profiting from her scheme. By the time I boarded my flight, Horace Wellington's scandal was trending on social media, with fierce debates about academic institutions, family dynasties, and the ethics of scholarships. It was surreal to see something so personal to me, the funding for my education, transformed into a national conversation about privilege, accountability, and systemic reform. When my plane landed, I turned on my phone to find a flurry of messages, including 3 from local news stations requesting interviews. I ignored those in favor of the ones from my parents, letting them know I was back safely. Dad was waiting at the arrival gate, his face lighting up when he spotted me. After a long hug, he held me at arm's length, studying me with a mixture of pride and concern. "You look different," he said as we walked toward the parking garage. "Different how?" He considered this. "More certain, I think. Like you've figured something out." I smiled, touched by his perception. "Maybe I have." At home, Mom had prepared all my favorites: dumplings, hot and sour soup, and sesame noodles. Olivia actually detached from her phone long enough to give me a hug and pepper me with questions about Stanford and the scandal. Anna stepped back, allowing him to enter the apartment he'd been quietly paying for since she'd reappeared in his life 2 years ago, pregnant and desperate, after he'd abandoned her and her mother 23 years earlier. "It's over, isn't it?" Anna asked quietly. "She found out about me?" Dean shook his head. "Not yet, but she will soon, and when she does." He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. When Piper discovered that the real A. Monroe wasn't Ashley but Anna, the daughter Dean had never told her about, the family he'd hidden while building a new life, there would be no possibility of forgiveness. Not just for the financial betrayal, but for the 17 years of lies about who he truly was. 3 days after serving Dean with divorce papers, I sat in the oncologist's office reviewing my treatment plan. The first round of chemotherapy had hit me harder than expected, leaving me weak and nauseated, my body struggling to recover before the next assault. "Your blood counts are lower than we'd like," Dr. Harrison explained, studying my lab results with a slight frown. "We may need to adjust the dosage for your next treatment." I nodded, too exhausted to feel concerned. Between the physical toll of cancer treatment and the emotional aftermath of confronting Dean, I had little energy left for worry. "Is there someone staying with you?" the doctor asked. "These side effects can be unpredictable, and I'd prefer you weren't alone." "My friend Jenna has been staying over," I replied. "And I've hired a part-time caregiver for when she can't be there." Dr. Harrison nodded approval. "Good. And your husband?" The question hung in the air, laden with complicated emotions. "We're separated," I said simply. "Divorce proceedings have begun." If the doctor was surprised, she didn't show it. "I see. Well, make sure you have adequate support. Cancer treatment is challenging enough without adding additional stressors." Additional stressors. Such a clinical term for the implosion of my marriage, the discovery of years of deception, the ongoing legal battle over finances. I almost laughed at the understatement. When I returned home, Calvin was waiting in the driveway, his expression unreadable. I felt a flutter of anxiety. Unexpected visits from attorneys rarely brought good news. "What's happened?" I asked as Jenna helped me from the car. "We should talk inside," Calvin replied, following us into the house. Once settled in the living room, Calvin opened his briefcase. "I've received a settlement offer from Dean's attorney. It's unusual." He handed me a document which I scanned quickly, my heart racing as I absorbed the contents. Dean was offering a complete financial disclosure, the return of all diverted funds, and an uncontested divorce with a settlement heavily weighted in my favor. "Why?" I asked, looking up at Calvin. "Why would he give up so easily?" "There's a condition," Calvin said, pointing to a clause near the end of the document. "He wants a private meeting with you. Alone." I frowned. "That's it? A conversation in exchange for everything we've been fighting for?" "Apparently." Of course, I advised against meeting without representation, but he's insistent. Says there's something you need to know that can only be shared in person. I considered the offer, turning it over in my mind. It seemed too good to be true. Dean surrendering without a fight, returning the diverted funds, agreeing to my terms. What could he possibly have to say that would warrant such concessions? "When?" I asked finally. "Tomorrow, if you're up to it. At my office, despite his request for privacy. I'll be in the next room." After Calvin left, Jenna voiced her concerns. Cascade Coffee was busy with morning customers when I arrived. I scanned the room, unsure who I was looking for, when a young woman approached my table. She was in her mid-20s, slim with dark hair and familiar hazel eyes. Dean's eyes. "Mrs. Wallace?" she asked tentatively. "I'm Anna." My breath caught. The resemblance was unmistakable. The shape of her jaw, the set of her shoulders, even the way she held her coffee cup mirrored Dean's mannerisms. "You're his daughter," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Anna nodded, sliding into the chair across from me. "He doesn't know I'm meeting you. He'd be furious if he found out." "How?" I began, then stopped, recalibrating every assumption I'd made about Dean's betrayal. "How old are you?" 26, she replied. "He left my mother and me when I was 3. Paid child support but otherwise disappeared from our lives until 2 years ago when I found him again." The timeline fell into place with devastating clarity. Dean was 47 now. He would have been 21 when Anna was born, years before I met him. "He never told me he had a child," I said numbly. "He never told anyone," Anna replied. Not his parents, not his friends, and certainly not you. Dean Wallace, respected financial advisor, built his entire identity on leaving his past behind, including me. I struggled to process this revelation, to align it with the man I thought I knew. The money, I said finally. The transfers to A. Monroe. That was you? She nodded, her expression complicated with guilt and defiance. Not just for me, for my son. Carter is 4. She pulled out her phone, showing me a photo of a smiling little boy with Dean's eyes. Dean's grandson. When I found Dean 2 years ago, I was struggling. Carter has medical issues, nothing life-threatening but expensive. I needed help. So Dean gave you money from our savings, I concluded. Without telling me about you, without telling me I had a stepson. Yes, Anna admitted. And then his boss found out somehow and started blackmailing him. That's where the rest of the money went. As I stared at the photo of by the time I arrived, my shock had hardened into something else. A cold clarity, a determination to face whatever came next with the same courage I'd found to fight my cancer. Calvin met me in the lobby, concern evident in his expression. You look pale. Are you sure you're up for this? I've never been more sure of anything, I replied. Is he here? In my office. Alone, as requested. I'll be next door if you need me. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, then walked into the E office. Dean stood as I entered, his face drawn with tension. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Hair uncombed, shirt wrinkled, eyes haunted. Piper, he began. Thank you for... I met Anna, I interrupted, watching the color drain from his face. And I've seen a picture of Carter. Dean sank back into his chair, all pretense collapsing. How? She found me. It seems hiding the truth runs in your family, but not everyone is as committed to deception as you are. He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. I was going to tell you today. That's why I asked for this meeting. Because you had no choice, I said coldly. Because you knew it would come out in the divorce proceedings anyway. No, he insisted, looking up at last. Because you deserve to know everything before we end our marriage. The whole truth, not just pieces. The whole truth? I laughed bitterly. You've hidden an entire family from me for 17 years. You let me think I knew you, that we were building something honest together, when you'd been lying since the day we met. When exactly were you planning to mention your daughter, your grandson? Dean's hands trembled as he ran them through his hair. I was young, Piper, 21, a sophomore in college. Anna's mother was my high school girlfriend. When she got pregnant, I panicked. I wasn't ready to be a father. So you walked away, I said, the words heavy with judgment. I paid child support, he said defensively. I did what was legally required. How noble. I was a kid. I made a terrible choice, then another, then another. By the time I met you, I'd convinced myself that part of my life was over. I could start fresh, be the man I wanted to be instead of the one who'd run from responsibility. And when Anna found you again? When you found out you had a grandson, with medical needs? Dean's shoulders slumped. I couldn't turn them away, but I couldn't figure out how to tell you either. How do you tell your wife of 15 years that you've hidden an entire family from her? That your whole identity is built on a lie? You find the courage, I said simply. You trust in the love you claim to have. You respect your partner enough to give them the truth, however painful. We sat in silence, the magnitude of his deception expanding to fill the room. Finally, I asked the question that had been burning since I'd met Anna. Arnold Miller, your boss, he was blackmailing you about Anna? Dean nodded. He discovered her existence during a background check for my promotion to the executive committee. He threatened to expose me, to you, to the firm, to our social circle. Said it would raise questions about my judgment, my character. That the board wouldn't want someone who'd abandoned his family making decisions about other people's money. How much did you pay him? Almost $50,000 over the past year. It started small, a few thousand here and there. Then the demands increased. I shook my head, stunned by the scale of the deception. And Ashley? Where does she fit in all this? Dean had the grace to look ashamed. A distraction, a complication I never intended. When your diagnosis came, enough, I cut him off. I don't need the details of your affair. Not anymore. I stood, suddenly exhausted by it all. The cancer, the betrayal, the layers of lies. I'll accept your settlement offer, Dean. Full financial disclosure, return of all diverted funds, uncontested. Divorce. Relief flooded his face. Thank you, Piper. I'll make this as painless as possible, I promise. Don't, I said sharply. Don't make promises to me. Not ever again. Your promises mean nothing. As I turned to leave, he called after me. What about Anna? And Carter? I paused, hand on the doorknob. What about them? Will you tell anyone about them? I looked back at this broken man, this stranger, I'd loved for 17 years. That's not my secret to tell, Dean. Unlike you, I don't make a habit of keeping families hidden. I walked out without another word, leaving Dean 6 months after my meeting with Dean, I sat in Calvin Friedman's office signing the final divorce papers. The settlement was everything Calvin had promised. I kept the house, received all the diverted funds plus interest, and secured my position on Dean's health insurance for the maximum 3 years allowed by law. That's it, Calvin said, taking the last document I'd signed. Officially divorced. The judge will sign off on this by the end of the week. I felt a strange emptiness, as if I'd expected some momentous shift, some clear delineation between married and single. Instead, there was just quiet and paperwork, and the soft sound of Calvin's secretary collating documents in the next room. How are you feeling? Calvin asked, his professional demeanor softening. I'm not sure, I admitted. Relieved, I suppose. And a little sad. That's normal. Even when divorce is necessary, there's grief for what's lost. I nodded, appreciating his understanding. What about the house? Is it really mine, free and clear? Absolutely. Dean waived all claim to it. The deed transfer is already recorded with the county. I hadn't seen Dean since that day in Calvin's office. Our communication had been strictly through attorneys. I'd heard through Jenna that he'd resigned from his position at the firm and was relocating to Chicago. Starting over again, I supposed. Reinventing himself had always been his specialty. And Anna and Carter? Calvin asked carefully. Have you had any further contact with them? Some, I said. We've met for coffee twice. She's remarkable, considering everything. Strong, resilient. Carter is adorable. The relationship had started tentatively. Two women connected by a man who had betrayed them both, trying to find footing in a situation neither had created. But there was something genuine in Anna that I respected. She hadn't asked for any of this. Neither had I. What will you do now? Calvin asked as he walked me to the elevator. Focus on getting well, I replied. My last scan showed good response to treatment. Dr. Harrison is optimistic. And after that? When you're well? I smiled at the certainty in his voice. When, not, if. I haven't decided yet. Travel, maybe. I've always wanted to see Italy. Without Dean, he observed. Without Dean, I agreed. On my own terms. Maybe. I've always wanted to see Italy. Without Dean, he observed. Without Dean, I agreed. On my own terms. Maybe. I've always wanted to see Italy. Without Dean, he observed. Without Dean, I agreed. On my own terms. Maybe. I've always wanted to see Italy. Without Dean, he observed. Without Dean, I agreed. On my own terms. Maybe. I've always wanted to see Italy. Without Dean, he observed. Without Dean, I agreed. On my own terms. Maybe. I've always wanted to see Italy. Without Dean, he observed. Without Dean, I agreed. On my own terms. Maybe. I've always wanted to see Italy. Without Dean, he observed. Without Dean, I agreed. On my own terms. Maybe. I've always wanted to see Italy. Without Dean, he observed. Without Dean, I agreed. On my own terms. Maybe. I've always wanted to see Italy. Without Dean, he observed. Without Dean, I agreed. On my own terms. Maybe. I've always wanted to see Italy. Without Dean, he observed. Without Dean, I agreed. On my own terms. Maybe. I've always wanted to see Italy. Without Dean, he observed. Without Dean, I agreed. On my own terms. Maybe. I've always wanted to see Italy. When I arrived home, my home now, legally and completely, I stood in the entryway taking stock. Over the past 6 months, I'd been slowly transforming the space, removing traces of Dean room by room. New paint in the living room, new bedding, his books donated, his closet emptied, his home office, once the command center of his financial deceptions, was now my meditation room, bright with morning light and plants. I'd kept only a few photographs from our marriage, not out of sentimentality, but as reminders of my own resilience. 17 years of my life had been spent with a man who'd never truly shown me who he was. I refused to pretend those years hadn't happened or hadn't shaped me. I made tea and carried it to the back deck, settling into the Adirondack chair that faced the garden. The weather was turning, summer fading into early fall, the afternoon light golden against the maple trees. My body felt stronger than it had in months, the worst of the chemotherapy behind me, my hair beginning to grow back in soft, silver-tinged curls, my energy returning in small but noticeable increments. My phone rang. Jenna. "It's done?" she asked. When I answered. "Signed and delivered?" I confirmed. "I am officially no longer Mrs. Dean Wallace." "How shall we celebrate? Champagne? Bonfire of his remaining belongings? Voodoo doll?" I laughed, grateful as always for her fierce loyalty. "Rain check? I'm surprisingly tired. I think I just need a quiet evening to process." "Whatever you need. We'll celebrate when you're ready." After we hung up, I sipped my tea and watched the shadows lengthen across the lawn. Divorce, cancer, betrayal, survival. Not the midlife experience I'd imagined for myself, certainly not the future Dean and I had planned together on that mountain property, so long ago. Yet here I was, still standing, still breathing, still moving forward one day at a time. My phone buzzed with a text message. Anna. "Heard today was final. Hope you're doing okay. Carter made this for you." Attached was a photo of a crayon drawing. Stick. Figures under a rainbow, one with curly hair that I assumed was meant to be me. I smiled, touched by the gesture and the complicated connection it represented. I hadn't asked for a stepson or a step-grandson. I certainly hadn't asked for them to appear in my life just as my marriage was imploding and my health was under siege. Yet there was something healing in the relationship we were cautiously building, something honest in a situation born of lies. I texted back, "Thank you. It's beautiful. Tell him I'll put it on my refrigerator." The relationship with Anna was complicated, neither friendship nor family exactly, but something in between. We met occasionally for coffee, sharing careful conversation about our lives, our feelings about Dean limited but acknowledged. She never asked for money, though I knew she and Carter still struggled financially. The support from Dean was steady, but minimal, his presence in their lives already fading as he established himself in Chicago. 1 month after the divorce was finalized, I made a decision. I called my financial advisor, not Dean's colleague, but someone new, someone untainted by connection to my ex-husband. I'd like to establish a college fund, I told her, for my step-grandson. Of course, she replied, efficient and unquestioning. How much would you like to contribute initially? $25,000, I said without hesitation. And I'd like to set up automatic monthly contributions as well. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to grow substantially over the next 14 years until Carter reached college age. Enough to give him options. 1 year after my diagnosis, I stood in the oncologist's office receiving very different news than I had expected. The scans are clear, Dr. Harrison said, smiling as she showed me the images. No detectable cancer. You've responded remarkably well to treatment. Relief washed over me so intense I felt lightheaded. After 6 grueling rounds of chemotherapy, 35 radiation sessions, and countless days of pain and exhaustion, my body had won its battle. The cancer was gone, at least for now. We'll continue monitoring, of course, Dr. Harrison cautioned. Monthly checkups for the first year, then quarterly. But Piper, this is the outcome we hoped for. I nodded, tears blurring my vision. Thank you for everything. Outside the hospital, I sat in my car, allowing the news to sink in. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Lunch with Anna and Carter, 1 p.m. Our relationship had evolved over the past year from cautious coffee meetings to something resembling friendship. I'd finally told Anna about the college fund 3 months ago, overcome by the joy of watching Carter open gifts at his 5th birthday party, a celebration she'd hesitantly invited me to, unsure where I fit in her life, but wanting me there nonetheless. She'd cried when I told her. Not the performance of gratitude I'd half feared, but genuine stunned emotion. Why? She'd asked simply. After everything he did, why would you do this for us? Because none of this is Carter's fault, I'd replied, and it's not your fault either. We all deserve a chance to build something better than what Dean left behind at the small cafe near the park. Anna waved from a corner table, Carter coloring intently beside her. Watching them together always gave me a strange feeling. Seeing Dean's features echoed in both their faces, mannerisms I'd known intimately for 17 years appearing unexpectedly in people who had been strangers to me just a year ago. How did it go? Anna asked as I sat down, her eyes searching my face for clues. All clear, I said, still hardly believing it myself. No detectable cancer. Oh my God. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. That's amazing. I'm so happy for you. Carter looked up from his coloring. Are you still sick? Not anymore, I told him, smiling at his direct approach. The doctors say I'm getting better. He nodded solemnly. That's good. Being sick is the worst. It certainly is, I agreed. After lunch, we walked to the park, Carter racing ahead to the swings while Anna and I settled on a bench. Have you heard from him? I asked, not needing to specify who. Lunch, we walked to the park, Carter racing ahead to the swings while Anna and I settled on a bench. Have you heard from him? I asked, not needing to specify who. Lunch, we walked to the park, Carter racing ahead to the swings while Anna and I settled on a bench. Have you heard from him? I asked, not needing to specify who. Lunch, we walked to the park, Carter racing ahead to the swings while Anna and I settled on a bench. Have you heard from him? I asked, not needing to specify who. Lunch, we walked to the park, Carter racing ahead to the swings while Anna and I settled on a bench. Have you heard from him? I asked, not needing to specify who. She shook her head. Not since the child support payment last month. He sends Carter birthday and Christmas gifts, calls every couple of weeks, but he's fading from our lives again, just like before. I wasn't surprised. Dean's pattern was established, create chaos, then retreat, leaving others to deal with the aftermath. "What about you?" she asked. "Any contact?" "None," I said. "And I prefer it that way." We watched Carter on the swings, his laughter carrying across the playground. There was something healing about this unlikely friendship Anna and I had formed. Something redemptive in our mutual decision to create connection where Dean had sown only secrets and lies. "What will you do now?" she asked. "Now that you're healthy again?" It was a question many people had asked me over the past year, as if recovery from cancer and divorce should automatically trigger some dramatic life transformation. "I'm restarting my consulting business," I told her, "and I sold the mountain property." "Your retirement dream," she said, remembering details I'd shared during our conversations. "Dean's and mine," I corrected gently. "I'm creating new dreams. Now." What I didn't tell her was that I'd used half the proceeds from the property sale to establish a foundation, small but focused, providing emergency financial assistance to cancer patients. The idea had come during my darkest days of treatment, when I'd witnessed firsthand how quickly medical bills could devastate even the comfortably middle class. "I may need some marketing help with the business relaunch," I said casually. "I seem to recall you majored in marketing before Carter came along." Anna's head snapped toward me, surprise evident in her expression. "Are you offering me a job?" "Consulting work," I clarified. "Part-time, flexible hours, work from home, if you're interested." She studied me skeptically. "Is this charity? Because Dean's not supporting us enough?" "It's opportunity," I said firmly. "I need the help. You need the income and recent work experience. We both benefit. Nothing charitable about it." I'd spent enough time with Anna over the past year to recognize the fierce pride she'd developed as a single mother determined to stand on her own. She wouldn't accept handouts, but she would accept fair exchange, her skills for my needs. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "That's all I ask." As we watched Carter play, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent for so long. The cancer was gone, the marriage was over, the deception was exposed. What remained was possibility, and for the first time in years, that felt like enough. 2 years after my diagnosis, I stood at the podium of a hotel ballroom, facing an audience of cancer survivors, medical professionals, and donors gathered for the inaugural fundraiser of the Wallace Collins Financial Stability Foundation. "When I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer," I began, my voice steady, "I thought the disease was my greatest challenge. I was wrong. For many patients, the financial toxicity of cancer treatment is equally devastating. Medical bills, lost income, depleted savings. These financial side effects can persist long after the physical symptoms have been treated." The foundation had grown from idea to reality more quickly than I'd anticipated, fueled by my professional connections and personal story. Our mission was simple: to provide emergency financial assistance to cancer patients, helping them maintain stability during treatment and recovery. "No one should have to choose between medical care and paying their mortgage," I continued. "No, one should face bankruptcy because they chose to fight for their life." From the front row, Jenna gave me an encouraging smile. Beside her sat Anna and Carter, now 6 and thriving after successful treatment for his developmental issues. My relationship with them had evolved into something